No one on Meridian Station could explain what happened that day, because in a place where a single wrong gesture could ignite interstellar war, a child did the unthinkable, and a human did something even more impossible. The kind born from absolute disbelief. By the time security drones flooded the diplomatic corridor, every eye in the Eastern Transit Hall had already locked onto the same impossible scene. Ambassador Elias Rourke, official representative of Earth's Outer Colonial Alliance, stood perfectly still beneath the silver glow of Meridian Station's vaulted ceiling, and clamped around his arm was the jaw of a Verith child. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Because across half the known galaxy, the Verith were not simply feared, they were remembered. Entire worlds had grown silent at the mention of their name. Their species had evolved on a death world where weakness was consumed before it could learn to stand. Massive, armored, and born with instincts sharper than military training, adult Verith were considered among the most dangerous sentient beings ever admitted into civilized space. And now one of their young had sunk razor-line teeth into a human diplomat in the middle of the busiest station in known space. The child was small by Verith standards, barely shoulder-high to a human. Dark silver scales shimmered across his narrow frame. A row of folded dorsal spines trembled violently down his back. His claws dug into the polished station floor, and his golden predator eyes, wide with panic, stared upward as though he himself could not believe what he had done. Around them, the corridor froze. Merchants stopped speaking. Travelers stepped back. Station officers reached for pulse sidearms. They prayed they would not have to fire. And on the upper observation balconies, whispers spread like wildfire. A Verith attack on a human ambassador. Inside a diplomatic sector. It was the kind of moment civilizations did not recover from. One nervous officer could fire. One frightened parent could scream. One political rival could exploit the chaos. And within hours, the story could become the spark that dragged 3 systems into conflict. Elias Rourke knew that. He understood it instantly, because despite what the station records said, despite the polished title, despite the ceremonial uniform stitched with Earth's blue insignia, Elias Rourke was not just a diplomat. He was a man who had spent 20 years walking into rooms where everyone expected violence and surviving because he chose something else. Blood ran slowly from the punctures in his forearm, bright red, shockingly vivid against the pale fabric of his sleeve. Several nearby aliens gasped at the sight. Humans healed quickly by galactic standards. But human blood still carried a reputation of its own. To many species, the sight of it meant only one thing: retaliation. A nearby station guard raised his weapon. "Release the ambassador," he shouted. The Verith child flinched. His eyes widened, and suddenly everyone saw it. Not aggression, not rage, fear, pure, raw, paralyzing fear. The child released Elias's arm so suddenly he nearly stumbled backward. He hit the floor hard, claws scraping the polished metal beneath him, chest heaving in short, frantic breaths. The entire corridor waited for the human to react, for anger, for outrage. For the beginning of a diplomatic catastrophe, because that was how every other species would respond. The Verith knew that. The station knew that. Even the frightened child seemed to know it. He pressed himself against the floor as though waiting for punishment, waiting for pain, waiting for the violence the galaxy had taught him always came next. And for one long moment, Meridian Station held its breath. Elias slowly looked down at the blood on his sleeve, then at the trembling child, then at the weapons pointed in their direction. And what he did next would become one of the most talked about moments in modern diplomatic history. Because instead of stepping back, instead of shouting, instead of demanding justice, Ambassador Elias Rourke knelt beside the creature that had just bitten him. The corridor erupted in stunned silence. Even the station itself seemed quieter. The Verith child stared at him, frozen. Elias ignored the blood, ignored the guards, ignored the horrified faces surrounding them, and in a calm voice barely above a whisper, he said 5 words no one expected to hear. "Aye, you didn't mean to." The child blinked. Once, as if his translator implant had failed, as if his ears had betrayed him, as if no one in his entire life had ever responded to fear with kindness. Elias kept his voice low, gentle, steady, the same way someone might speak to a terrified animal trapped in a storm. "It's all right," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." Why? Several people in the corridor physically recoiled. A Dravik merchant dropped the tray in his hands. A pair of station officers exchanged looks of complete disbelief, and somewhere above them, hidden behind the mirrored observation glass, senior diplomatic officials began rushing toward the scene. Because what they were witnessing made no sense. A predator species raised to believe mistakes were punished, a child waiting to be treated like a monster, and a human bleeding who refused to act afraid. The Verith child's breathing remained ragged. His claws trembled against the floor, but slowly, very slowly, the spines along his back began to lower. Elias noticed. Of course he noticed, because humans had always been strangely good at recognizing pain in places other species never thought to look. He carefully lowered himself to one knee so he appeared smaller, less threatening. Another impossible gesture, another shockwave through the watching crowd. "Or scared," Elias said quietly. The child's golden eyes locked onto his, and for the first time since the bite, the young predator looked less dangerous and more like a frightened child who had made a terrible mistake. Elias gave a faint smile. "You're not in trouble," he said. And across Meridian Station, among officers, diplomats, traders, and beings from 40 different worlds, something impossible began. Because for the first time in living memory, someone looked at a Varith and saw something other than a threat. For several seconds after Elias Rourke spoke, no one on Meridian Station remembered how to breathe. The corridor remained frozen in a silence so complete it felt unnatural. Even the constant mechanical hum of the station, the distant engines, the moving freight rails, the whisper of climate systems inside the walls seemed to fade beneath the weight of what everyone had just witnessed. A human ambassador had been bitten by one of the most feared species in the galaxy. And instead of demanding punishment, he had offered comfort. To most of the beings watching, that alone was incomprehensible. To the Verith child kneeling on the polished floor only inches away from him, it was something even stranger. It was terrifying. Because kindness was not something his species understood from strangers, among the Verith, survival had shaped every instinct. Their homeworld, Karis, was a planet of crushing gravity, violent storms, and predators so lethal that even younglings learned quickly that hesitation could mean death. Mercy was considered weakness, fear was considered shame, and mistakes, especially public ones, were never forgotten. The child knew that, even if no one around him understood it yet. His golden eyes remained locked on Elias's face, wide with confusion. His narrow chest rose and fell too quickly. The small claws at the ends of his hands flexed against the floor in nervous, uneven movements. To everyone else, it still looked dangerous. To Elias, it looked heartbreakingly familiar, because he had seen that same expression before. Not on alien worlds, not in diplomatic chambers, but years earlier on Earth, on a colony transport station orbiting Europa. A little boy, no older than 6, hiding under a metal bench after an explosion had torn through a civilian dock. Too frightened to speak, too shocked to cry, too convinced the world had suddenly become a place where adults only arrived to make things worse. Elias had never forgotten that face. And now, staring into the eyes of a predator child from a world half the galaxy feared, he saw the same thing. Not violence, not hatred, just fear, raw and overwhelming. Behind him, boots struck the corridor floor. Fast, sharp, official, station secure. The crowd instinctively pulled back as a squad of armed officers pushed through the growing circle of witnesses. Their armor gleamed under the corridor lights, pulse rifles raised, target systems already tracking the young Verith from multiple angles. The lead officer didn't hesitate. A step away from the child ambassador, Elias did not move. The officer's voice hardened. "Sir, now." Only then did Elias glance over his shoulder. Commander Selvaron, Chief of Meridian Internal Security, former military, decorated, respected, and absolutely not a man who enjoyed surprises. At the moment, his expression looked carved from stone. Elias understood why. A diplomatic incident involving the Verith was already dangerous. A human ambassador kneeling beside the attacker while bleeding on station property. That was the kind of report that ended careers, maybe governments, maybe peace itself. Still, Elias remained where he was. "He's not a threat," Elias said calmly. The words hit the corridor like another shockwave. Several witnesses stared openly. One officer actually lowered his rifle in disbelief before quickly raising it again. Commander Varen blinked once, certain he had misheard. "Ambassador," he said carefully, with respect, "he bit you." Elias glanced down at the blood on his sleeve, then back to the trembling child. "Yes," he said. "He did." Varen's jaw tightened. "And you're saying he is not dangerous?" Elias held the commander's stare for a moment. Then he answered with a kind of quiet certainty that made people listen even when they didn't want to. No," Elias said. "I'm saying he's scared." The officers looked at one another, some confused, some skeptical, some deeply uncomfortable. Because fear was not a word usually associated with the Vareth. Predator, aggressive, unpredictable, violent. Those words people understood. Fear, that was harder. The young Vareth shifted slightly. Every weapon in the corridor snapped tighter toward him. The child froze again instantly, his body rigid. Elias noticed the reaction. So did the commander. And for the first time, Varen's expression changed. Only slightly. Just enough to reveal that he, too, had begun seeing what Elias saw. Not an attack, a panic response. The child's gaze moved from rifle to rifle, then back to Elias. And in that single glance, the ambassador understood something no translator could ever explain. The child wasn't afraid of being shot. He was afraid Elias would agree that he deserved it. That realization hit harder than the bite. Because suddenly this was no longer about a diplomatic incident. It was about something much older, much sadder, an entire species that had spent so long being feared. Their children had learned to fear themselves. From the upper level, hurried voices echoed through the hall. More officials were arriving, diplomatic personnel, medical staff, witnesses with authority, and inevitably, recorders. Elias could already imagine what the headlines would become by morning. Human ambassador attacked by Vareth youngling peace talks and Jeopardy Meridian security failure under investigation. But he also knew something the cameras would never capture. The next few seconds mattered more than the bite itself. Because every child learns from the moment after they make a mistake. And this child, surrounded by armed strangers, was learning right now what humanity truly was. Elias slowly removed one glove. Several officers tensed. Varen took half a step forward. "Ambassador." "It's all right," Elias said. And then very slowly he held out his open hand. Not toward the guards, toward the child. The corridor became so silent it almost felt sacred. No one moved, no one spoke. No one could quite believe what they were seeing. The child stared at the offered hand as if it were impossible. As if his mind could not understand why someone bleeding because of him would still reach closer instead of pulling away. Elias kept his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to be afraid." The child's throat tightened. A tiny sound escaped him. Soft, broken, almost too quiet to hear. But every being in that corridor heard it. Because it wasn't a growl. It wasn't aggression. It was a whimper. And in that moment, the entire station saw the truth. The galaxy's most feared predators had children who cried just like everyone else. A murmur spread through the crowd.
"The readings are off the
Not
charts.
panic this time. Something else.
It's
Something
radiating
far more
an
dangerous.
unknown energy
Doubt.
pattern. We must
Once fear
alert
begins
the
to crack,
fleet.
it rarely stays intact
Its
for long.
intent is hostile."
The young Vareth looked at Elias's
Let's
hand
try
for
a visual
another trembling
conversation,
second. Then
non-digital.
slowly, hesitantly, he placed his smaller
you
clawed hand into the
insane?
human's palm. And across Meridian Station, as
Look,
every witness
it's
understood,
working.
they were watching a moment history would
beautiful.
remember. Not because a child had bitten a diplomat,
scales
but because
are
a human being had
changing.
chosen compassion when the entire galaxy expected fear.
miracle.
The moment the young Vareth
Open
placed
the
his
bay
trembling hand
doors.
on Elias Rourke's not visibly,
Are you
not
certain
all at
this is
once, but in a
wise?
subtle way, a
Low
room
growl.
changes when everyone suddenly realizes
It's
they may have been
alive.
wrong. For generations, the
chemical
Vareth had
spike
been
is
the
off the
species whispered
charts.
about in secured chambers. The monster's diplomats smiled at while quietly calculating evacuation rates. The predators every civilization
Extraordinary.
tolerated, but never trusted.
Truth
And now in the
begins.
center of Meridian Station's diplomatic quarter, one of their children stood beside a bleeding human as if he had discovered something no one else in the galaxy had ever offered him before. Safety. Commander Varan lowered his rifle first. It wasn't a dramatic movement. Barely noticeable. Just enough
Look
for the
at
barrel
them.
to tilt a few inches toward the floor. But the officers behind him noticed immediately. Within
It is the
seconds, one by one,
civilization
the
we
weapons in the
spoke
corridor
of.
were lowered.
A
The shift
million
rippled through the
years
crowd.
thriving.
Whispers spread.
They
Some
didn't just
confused,
come to
some
talk.
emotional,
They've
some
come to
deeply
heal.
uncomfortable, because prejudice feels
The
stable
spindle
until
is
reality refuses to
reborn.
cooperate. Elias
Watch.
remained kneeling. The child's small claws still rested
Do you see
uncertainly
this?
against his hand. His
It's
breathing was
rewriting the
slower,
architecture.
still uneven, still
I've
frightened,
never seen
but no
anything
longer
like
wild.
it. It's impossible.
The defensive spines
Impossible
along
is
his
just
back had
the
folded
start.
nearly flat. His ears, small ridged fins pressed
Lock
against the side
down
of his
now.
head,
Repeat,
lifted
lock
just
down
slightly.
now.
To most species,
Evacuate
it meant
Sector
nothing.
7,
To
avoid the
anyone who knew
bio.
Vareth body language, it meant trust. Only a little, but enough. Elias noticed it. And before he could say another word, the corridor light shifted. A sharp blue pulse flashed overhead. Emergency diplomatic lockdown. The crowd collectively looked upward, then toward the far end of the hall. Heavy footsteps echoed against the metal floor. Slow, measured, flow, measured. Powerful enough that people instinctively stepped back before they even saw who was coming. And for the first time since entering the corridor, the Vareth parents looked less like predators and more like parents who suddenly realized they might not understand their own son. Around them, station personnel were no longer staring at a crisis.
Code
They were
Red,
witnessing something
execute
much
fleet-wide
rarer.
pulse
A
immediately.
species confronting
Override
itself.
safety.
Elias adjusted his seat. It was an accident, he said. He doesn't need punishment. He needs to know a mistake doesn't mean the words seemed impossible to ignore. Because for many watching, that sentence wasn't only about the child anymore. It was about the Vareth. Years of assumptions. Years of believing some species were
wave.
born to be
It
feared
stopped
forever.
them.
For the first
The
time,
bridge.
someone had challenged that belief
It's
in them. The female
transformed.
slowly knelt beside her son.
A
She placed one
strange
clawed hand
peace.
gently against
I
the
feel
back of
it
his neck.
still,
A
Elias.
gesture of
Their
reassurance.
peace.
Small,
There is no
instinctive,
room for
ancient.
anger
The
in my
child leaned
mind.
into it immediately.
We'll learn how to
And when
live
he
with
did,
it, Valen.
something in the corridor softened.
Together.
The male Vareth stared at Elias for a long moment, then finally asked the question no one else had dared say
I don't know
aloud.
what to
Why
do
would
with
you
them?
protect him?
Dock
Elias
the
met his
fleet.
gaze, and the
Tell
answer
them
he
we'll
gave
help
would
with
soon spread
repairs.
far beyond Meridian
The
Station,
station is
because
overwhelmed,
sometimes a single
Valen.
sentence can
We need
change
to
how
assign
civilizations
emergency
see
berths
each
for
other.
medical aid.
Elias's voice
Understood,
stayed calm,
Elias.
steady,
I will reroute
almost
the inbound
gentle.
fleet
But because,
immediately.
he said, and
After
someone
all
should.
this time,
And in the
yes.
silence that followed, even the
it
station itself seemed
permanent?
to understand. Nothing after this moment would ever be the same.
I hope
By the time
so.
the corridor had finally cleared, the moment no one was supposed to see had already been seen by millions.
The data from
Because
Sector
on Meridian
7
Station,
confirms
nothing
the
stayed
anomaly.
private for long.
Our
Not in a place where
findings are
merchants traded
consistent.
rumors
It is
faster than
expanding.
cargo. Not in a station where politicians
Our work
monitored
here
every
is
diplomatic breath, and certainly
We
not in
have
a corridor
planted
where a
the
dozen
seeds of
civilians had
empathy.
quietly activated recording
is up to
implants the
you
second
to
a
nurture
Vareth
them.
child sank his teeth
It's
into
gone.
a human ambassador. The first clip appeared less than 11 minutes later. No title,
The spindle
no
is
commentary,
healed.
just raw footage,
And
shaken,
Keth
silent,
approves.
unfiltered, a human kneeling in front of a frightened predator child
The
while
humans
armed
are
officers
sending a
surrounded
new
them. At first,
delegation.
viewers across the station
They aren't
assumed
coming
they were
with
watching the
weapons.
opening seconds of a tragedy.
They've
Most
finally
expected the same
understood.
ending. Violence, panic, retaliation. Instead, they watched Elias Rourke do something the galaxy had almost forgotten was possible. He chose gentleness. The recording spread through Meridian's internal networks before security could contain it.
Welcome,
Then
representatives
through
of
private
Earth.
channels. Then
We are
diplomatic
honored to
archives,
finally
then
meet
civilian
you as
feed,
equals
then
in the
beyond
galactic
the station
community.
itself. And once it escaped into the wider relay systems, there was no stopping it. Across dozens of worlds, beings stopped in
Elias,
the
what
middle of ordinary
happened
lives
here?
to watch the same impossible
It's been a long
scene.
time,
A minor
Sarah.
on Talos
Welcome
Prime
home.
paused mid-shift.
Welcome to
A
our new
transport pilot
home.
replayed
The
the clip 3
spindle is a
times
living
before
station
speaking.
now.
A school instructor
See?
on Veli shut off a
I'm not
lecture because
sure.
her students had
The
already
tree should
started
those
watching under
trees?
their
It
desks.
is true.
A
The
retired
station
war
lives.
officer on Orin
Keth is
stared
a
at the
living
image in
symbol of
silence
our
and whispered
balance,
words
Sarah.
he never thought
It's hard
he
to
would
grasp.
say.
What
Now
does he
that is
represent?
not what I was told they
He
were.
is the
because
bridge
for
between our
generations,
species.
The Vareth had only existed
See,
in the
General?
galaxy as a warning.
Peace
Children
doesn't
learned
need
about them in
weapons.
history lessons.
It's
Military
beautiful,
academies
but where
studied
are the
them in combat
guards?
simulations.
Protection comes in many
Politicians invoked
forms.
them whenever they
Cats
needed
say
fear
hello.
to win an
Earth
argument.
demands its rightful
The story
place.
was always the same. Predators.
We are here
unstable,
to prove
dangerous,
our worth.
different. But the footage told a different story.
Keth
A small
speaks
child
of their
trembling,
determination.
a parent arriving in fear, a human choosing compassion.
We welcome
and
you,
sometimes a
acknowledging
single
the
image can
bravery
undo
of your
decades
man
belief.
and his beast.
Inside the upper diplomatic chamber,
We are
panic was
grateful
spreading
for
almost
your
as fast as the
acknowledgement.
recording. Officials from
With
6
these
systems stood around a
resources, we will
circular
build a
projection table
future of
while the
lasting
footage played
peace
again in the air
across
above
the
them.
galaxy.
No one spoke at first
Yes.
because no one knew what to say. Because no one knew what to say. The recording ended with Elias standing
Something's
between the
wrong
child
with
and
the
the
readings,
handoff.
Elias.
The room remained silent for several seconds. Then
Silence.
Counselor
There
Maris
is an
of the
energy
Defies finally
spike.
broke
Peace
first.
may be
This cannot
tested.
be allowed
What
to
is
circulate.
happening?
Her voice
The
was
perimeter is
sharp,
breached.
controlled,
What
afraid.
is that?
Across the table, a trade
Elias.
representative turned toward
It's
her.
bigger than
It already
anything we've
is.
ever seen.
Maris looked furious. You
We
know
faced
exactly
it
what I
together.
mean. Yes,
The
they
perimeter
all
has
did.
been
Because
breached.
the danger was not
Scan
the bite.
for entry
It was not even the
vectors.
footage. The
interference
danger
is
was what
too
the footage
heavy. I
suggested,
can't get
that
a
the
fix.
galaxy might have been wrong.
It's coming
And
from
institutions
inside.
built on fear rarely survive the truth. At the far end of the chamber, station director Heaven folded his hands behind his back and stared at the frozen image of Elias kneeling before the child. I've reviewed 12 angles, he said quietly.
The nanite
there was
cloud
no
is
aggression from the
organic.
youngling after
We
contact.
can use the
A
station's
no
healing
hunting
binds
posture.
against
A
it.
no secondary
All battle
strike. A
stations
no predatory
target
intent.
Sector 5.
Maris
We
turned
must
sharply.
modulate the
He
bind's
attacked the
frequency
diplomat.
now.
Heaven didn't
I think
look away
I
from
can
the
access
image.
the system.
No, he said. He
Be
panicked.
careful,
The room
Elias.
went cold. Because in politics, language matters. Attack meant threat. Panic meant child. And those two words could reach.
Feed it! We have to
Meanwhile,
feed the
Elias
cloud
sat alone.
something else!
Three levels below, watching a regeneration patch seal
What?
the bite marks in his arm. The room was
Elias,
quiet
what are you
except for the
doing?
soft hiss of sterile
Power
air.
flow
A
engaged.
physician drone moved around him,
Balance.
scanning
Stabilize.
tissue damage and
I'm
muttering
on it.
diagnostic tones. But Elias barely noticed. His
Nanite
attention stayed
swarm
fixed on the
changing
transparent
course.
wall beside
The
him. Because
cloud
standing
heads
just
to the
outside the
moon.
room, half hidden behind the
Initiate
doorway,
the
was the
screen.
Varith child.
Understood.
The little one had been there
Directing
for almost
ships to the
6
moon.
minutes. Not entering, not leaving, just staring. Elias
They're not
pretended to
evil,
notice at
they're
first.
just hungry.
The child looked like
Provide
he was
energy.
debating whether he was allowed
It's
to
better
exist
than
there.
destruction.
Eventually, Elias
It's
glanced toward
working.
him. Their eyes
We
met.
found
The young
peace.
Varith immediately
The
flinched,
arena has
as though being
shown
seen
your
was
strength,
dangerous.
diplomat.
Elias smiled faintly.
Let
You
us
can come
discuss
in.
the
child
true
did not
terms
move.
of your
Elias
withdrawal.
waited.
We are here to
A few seconds later, the
finalize
small
the
figure
pact,
stepped into the room,
Commander.
slowly, cautiously, as if crossing an invisible line no one had ever invited him to cross
The
before.
blockade
The
was
medical
a
drone
direct
immediately
order
turned.
from them.
Unauthorized visitor detected. Elias waved a hand.
I know
He's
that
with me.
face.
The drone paused, then floated away in obedient silence. The child
They've been
stared at that
jammed.
too. Another impossible thing. A human had authority and had used it to make him feel safe. He stopped near the far
Valen
side of the room,
Source is in
unsure how close he
danger.
was allowed to stand. Up
Help
close,
me,
he looked
Vax.
even younger than
Our
Elias
planet
first
needs
thought.
you.
The scales around his eyes were still soft, his claws too small to fully retract. His shoulders
will
still carrying
return
that
to
nervous
the
tension children
station.
carried when they expected adults to change without warning.
You'll
Elias
get
leaned
through.
back slightly. Oh, what's your name?
I need
The child
faster than
hesitated,
that.
then quietly said,
Just
"Okay."
follow the
His
escort.
voice was rough, almost
Cat,
fragile, like he
lead
didn't
the
use it
way.
much. Elias nodded.
Systems are
Akale.
online.
That's a good name.
Get ready, Cat.
Varith blinked.
Good luck,
Then frowned
Elias.
slightly.
We'll
Not
be
because
back.
he disliked the words, because he did not seem to know what to do with praise. Elias had seen that before too. Far too many times.
Engaging
A deep
full
arm burst.
thrust.
The question was
Hold
so tight,
tight.
Elias almost missed it. He looked down at the healing one. Gale lowered
Not
his
now.
eyes. I did not want to hurt you.
Stabilizing.
There it was.
We're
the
clear.
real reason he had
Keep sharp, Cat.
curiosity, not confusion, guilt. Elias studied him for a moment, then asked softly, "Has
Sector
anyone ever
9
told you that
clear.
before?" Hale looked up.
More
A totally
coming in
quiet.
at
Elias's
Tweed.
expression
Get
gentle.
ready.
That making a mistake doesn't
Elias
make you
has found a
dangerous.
way
The room
inside.
fell silent. Hale
Maintenance
just stared at
hatch,
him.
sector
Because
guard.
sometimes the most powerful words are
Spindle
not
is
the loud
compromised.
ones. They are the ones someone
Let's
has waited
move
their entire
fast.
life to hear. Outside that room,
Open
unknown to
sesame.
both of them, the footage continued spreading across stations, across colonies,
Move it,
across
Elias.
worlds, and everywhere it went. The
Watch
same
out.
question followed. If a human could see a frightened
See
child where the
anything?
rest of the galaxy saw
Keep
a
your head
monster,
down,
what
Cat.
else had everyone been wrong about?
Warning.
The next cycle,
Unauthorized
Meridian
personnel
Station was
detected.
no longer talking about trade routes.
Just a
It was
bit
no longer
further.
talking about border negotiations. And it was no longer talking
They
about the
took
summit
your
that brought half the
insignia.
sector's diplomats
No one
together in the
knows
first
you're
place.
here.
It was talking about
We
one
need
thing,
to move
the
now.
human and the child.
I understand.
In cafes suspended above the transit ring, travelers replayed the footage in silence. In maintenance
blue
corridors, engineers
wire,
debated whether the
Elias.
recording had been
I'm
altered.
trying to override
Inside
the
private
mainframe,
lounges,
Valen. The
ambassadors who
firewall
had
is
spent years
tightening.
avoiding the
It's in the
Verif were
red
suddenly
data
asking the
stream.
same
Hurry, they're
uncomfortable
close.
question. What if
I
fear had
told you
become
I'd get
policy?
you out.
And what if policy had become prejudice? For some, the idea was unsettling. For others, it was
Elias.
infuriating. Because the
Oh,
galaxy
thank
had built entire
God.
systems around
Sure,
certainty.
sure.
Certainty was safe.
Valen,
Certainty
now.
was profitable. Certainty made enemies
burns.
easier to manage. And Elias Rourke had disrupted all of it with a single act
Inside
of
can't
compassion.
go.
He had not meant it. That was perhaps the most dangerous part. He had simply done what
They're
felt
tracking her.
The galaxy did not quite know what to do with that. Inside the diplomatic
in
residential
my arm.
Elias finally had a moment alone, or at least as alone as anyone could be on a station that now
Sound.
considered him the center
I
of an
have to
interstellar
do this,
controversy.
Valen.
His quarters were
Hold
quiet,
still.
minimal,
Do
a
it,
narrow
Elias.
sleeping alcove, a desk built into the
Quickly.
wall. A panoramic
Just a
window that
few more
revealed the curve of
seconds.
Meridian's inner ring, where
Almost
streams of
there.
ships glided
Keep
past
still.
like silent stars.
It needs to
Normally,
go now.
Elias found that view calming.
Just do
Tonight,
it.
it felt different.
He'll
He stood by the
chase it.
glass, rolling the
Now's
stiffness
our
from his healing
chance.
arm while the station lights reflected faintly against the transparent wall. He had spent years in diplomacy. He knew how moments like this usually ended. Committees, statements, political spin, Mona. Quiet warnings from people in expensive uniforms. And sooner or later, someone would ask why he had ignored protocol. Why
We
he had
don't need
touched
to
the child,
fight them.
why he
Just
had
reach
risked an
the
incident,
broadcast tower to
why he
play
had
the
made the galaxy
recording.
Understood. The data's
Elias already
secure.
knew his answer.
Hissing
Because sometimes
sound.
doing the right
Keep
thing and
moving,
doing the expected
Valen.
thing were not the same.
the
A
only
soft tone
way.
sounded at his door.
I
He
know.
turned. The panel lit blue.
Just get
Visitor
us there.
request. At this hour, that usually meant trouble. He almost ignored it. Then the system identified the guest. Kale, authorized accompanied access Elias, blinked. For the first time that day, he smiled. "I come in." The door slid open. Kale stood in the doorway, alone, no guards, no parents, no handlers, just a small Verith child
to the
standing
door.
uncertainly in a corridor clearly designed
I'm
for
trying.
adults. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Kale held something in his hands, small, metallic, polished. Elias recognized it immediately, a scale stone. Among the Verith, younglings often carried them as comfort objects, pieces of smoothed mineral from their homeworld warm to the touch, marked with family scent patterns no off-world species could detect. It was not something
The
casually
signal
shared,
must get
especially not with
through.
outsiders. Kale stepped forward, boom, then held
He
it out with
won't
both
make
hands.
it.
Elias looked
He
down at
has
him, then back
to.
at him. "Is this for me?"
Decrypt
Kale nodded.
faster.
His voice barely rose above a whisper.
stay here,
I thought
Valen.
humans liked
Finish
gifts.
the code.
words were simple,
I'll
but
secure
they hit
the
Elias
deck.
harder than he expected. Because the child was trying to repair something, trying to bridge a gap
Be
no one had
careful,
ever taught him
Elias.
how to cross.
Keep your distance.
Trying to say thank you in the only way he knew. Elias carefully
Threat
accepted the stone.
detected.
It was heavier than it looked. Still
Neutralizing.
faintly warm. "That's very kind of you," he said. Kale's eyes widened
Not
slightly.
without
Again,
a
that
fight.
same confusion.
Keep it
As if
busy,
kindness returned
Cat.
was still a language he did not fully understand. Elias placed the stone gently on the desk, then looked back. "You didn't have to do that." Kale lowered his gaze. "Yes, I did." The
Hissing
answer
roar.
was
Can't
so
keep
quiet,
it
Elias
busy.
almost whispered. He crouched
Snarl.
slightly so they were closer to eye level.
Just a
"Why?"
little
Kale
longer.
hesitated. For a long moment, it seemed like he might not answer. Then finally, he
Click.
said something no one else on the station had heard. Because when everyone looked at me, his throat tightened. "You
We
didn't
must
look afraid.
proceed with the
You didn't
vote.
look afraid." The room
No,
fell still.
the people
Outside
have a
the window,
right to
ships
know.
continued moving through artificial starlight. Inside, the silence carried something heavier. Because children often reveal truths adults spend years
This is
avoiding.
Valen's
Elias studied him
source.
carefully. Kale
The
was
truth
not just
is
talking about the
revealed.
corridor. He was
There
talking about
will
his whole
be
life.
peace.
About every room, every stare, every whispered warning, every adult who
Your
saw his species
unpredictable
before they saw
nature
him.
was
And Elias
precisely what
suddenly
was
understood the
needed.
real wound had never been the bite. It
We
was what
did
the child
what was
believed about
necessary.
himself. Before Elias could
I
answer,
missed
another voice
simple
came from the open
things.
doorway. "You should not be here alone."
But my
Turn
place is
inward.
here.
His father stood in the hall. Massive, still, unreadable.
We
For a second, Kale
welcome
looked
you.
as though he expected to be
The
pulled
High
away.
Council
Instead, the
has
older Verith
arrived.
remained where he was.
Welcome,
Not angry,
Commander.
not hostile, just uncertain.
Let
And
us
uncertainty
get
looked
this
strangely
done.
vulnerable on a species the galaxy only associated with power. He Elias straightened slowly.
The
I
council
told him he could
awaits,
come in. He lowered
Elias.
Varys' eyes,
Let
shifted
them
to the stone
wait.
on the desk, then to his son, then to Elias. Wait, he has never given that to anyone outside our
Hiss.
bloodline? Kale looked suddenly
Weird.
embarrassed. Elias
Look at
glanced the
them.
small stone again. He realized then what the gift truly meant. Trust.
Incredible.
Not yet.
Can I touch it?
The father exhaled slowly. Among humans, it might have sounded ordinary. Among the Vareth, it sounded like someone struggling to say something difficult. My son has spoken of you since the incident. Kale's ears flattened in embarrassment. The father ignored it. He says you are, he paused, as though
What
the
a
word itself felt
creature.
unnatural.
Elias accepts
No one in the galaxy
position,
would have expected that word from a
realizing that
Vareth
his
warrior,
journey
least of all
isn't
Elias.
an ending,
For a moment, the older
but
male
the
simply looked at
beginning
him,
of a long
then asked
road
quietly,
toward
"Oh, do
galactic
humans always
unity.
do this?" Elias raised an eyebrow. "Oh, do what?" The Vareth glanced at his son. "See what others refuse to see." That question lingered in the room, because it was larger than either of them, larger than one child, larger than one station. It was the kind of
Scale of
question that
it
could
all,
reshape history if enough people
it's
asked it honestly.
breathtaking.
Elias thought for a moment, then answered
We
with the
are
truth.
ready,
"I
Elias."
know."
Hissing
He looked at
sound.
Kale, then back at the father. But we can. And somewhere far beyond that room, the galaxy was
Human
beginning to realize that
engineering
might be
has
far more
proven
powerful than
critical
fear.
to the
By
gate's
the third cycle
stability.
after the incident,
Incredible. The
Meridian
energy
Station no longer felt
signatures
like
are
the same place.
spiking as
Nothing
predicted.
visible had changed. The same ship still drifted through docking lanes.
What's
The
happening?
same merchant still shouted over
The
cargo
hologram
manifests.
is failing.
The same diplomat still
energy
smiled with
surge.
carefully practiced
Lower
beneath
levels.
polished lights.
It's an
And yet something
unauthorized
subtle had
signature.
shifted.
They're in the
Because once people are forced to question a story they have believed
Zoom
for
in here.
generations, they begin noticing things they once ignored. Travelers who used to step aside when a Vareth entered a corridor no longer moved as quickly.
You'll be safe.
Station workers who once avoided eye contact now hesitated before looking away.
I know
Children
you'll
from
handle
other
it.
species, children too young to inherit
Stand
old
back.
hatred properly, began
Stand
asking
back.
their parents uncomfortable questions.
Power check
Questions
complete.
adults rarely enjoy. Why was the little Vareth
Destination
scared?
approaching.
Why did the human help him?
Stay
Are they really
alert.
monsters? And across the station, fewer people had easy answers. That was how change often began.
Keep
Not
close.
with speeches, not with laws, but with doubt, small,
The path
quiet,
is
persistent.
unclear.
And to those who had spent decades defending
Something's out
doubt could
there.
be terrifying. Inside the central
Stay
assembly
vigilant.
chamber, emergency delegates had been
Working.
arguing for
Hurry.
hours. Some wanted
We're
the footage
almost
suppressed.
there.
Some wanted Elias
Target
formally
acquired.
censored. Some wanted
Prepare
new
to
restrictions on
engage.
Vareth movement through diplomatic sectors. And a few, though not many, had begun asking whether the
Surgeons
real
down.
problems
Got one.
but the assumption
Watch out, they're here.
in silence. He had no interest in defending himself. That was not what mattered anymore, because this had stopped being about him the moment Kale had reached for his hand. Across from him, Counselor Mary slammed one palm against the illuminated table. "This is exactly how instability begins," she snapped. "How you are allowing emotion to override protocol." A few heads nodded. Maris turned toward Elias. "With respect, Ambassador, you may have good intentions, but civilizations cannot be built on sentiment." The chamber murmured
Almost
quietly.
out of
It was the
time.
kind of argument
You
that
will
often
not
sounded
stop this.
reasonable.
Get now.
Until someone said the quiet part aloud. Elias folded his
Get
hands.
off me.
The civilizations
Just
are
a
built
little
on stories, he
longer.
said. The room fell still. He continued, "And for a very long time, the galaxy has told itself a story about the Vareth. That they are dangerous, that they are different. That fear is wisdom." He looked around the chamber. And maybe some of that was true once. No one interrupted.
Elias,
even
you
his
don't
critics wanted to hear where
understand.
he
It
was
was
going.
just one.
Elias's
There
voice
are
stayed
two
steady.
more.
But if a child
What?
can learn to fear himself
Valen,
before he
what are
learns to
you
trust
saying?
anyone
No,
else,
it's
he
over.
paused. He paused.
Kid.
And maybe the story is hurting
They're in
more
the
than
life
just the people
support
who believe
sector.
it. Silence. D.
I'll need a way in.
Honest. For the first time all morning, no one
I
argued
know of a
because the room had
passage.
expected diplomacy. What it received instead was truth, and truth has a way of sounding louder than anger. Then the chamber doors opened. Every head turned. A station aide stepped inside, visibly nervous. "A director," she said carefully. "There is someone asking."
I can't reach it.
This session is sealed.
Too
The aide
deep.
swallowed. "Yes, sir.
Colin,
But it concerns the
the
ambassador."
cup.
A second later,
I
another
need
figure
the
appeared in
cup.
the doorway. Small, silver-scaled, golden eyed,
Cat,
pale.
you need
The
to be
entire chamber
fast.
stared.
Grab
Several
it
delegates
now,
looked horrified.
please.
Others looked confused. A few
Initiate
looked confused
retrieval
before they
protocols.
tried. Kale stood in the doorway for one uncertain second. Then his eyes found Elias, and without hesitation, he crossed the chamber, past military officers, past diplomats, past beings who had spent lifetimes fearing the threat. He walked straight to the human and reached for his hand. No one in the room spoke. Because sometimes the
Two
most
down.
powerful
The
moments are the
final
quietest
device
moments.
is in the
Elias
core.
stepped in.
Head
Kale's
straight.
small claws curled gently.
Understood.
No fear, no
Let's go.
just trust. Simple, visible, undeniable. The room did not see a speech. It did not see policy. It did not see politics. For the first time, it saw a child. And once that happened, it became much harder to keep calling him a monster. Kale looked up at Elias and asked in a voice so soft the chamber almost missed it. Did I do something wrong? Elias felt the weight of every eye in the room. Every diplomat. Every official. Every witness to a moment none of them would ever forget.
Untraceable
And he smiled.
crypto.
No, Elias
This
said
goes
quietly.
deeper
You
than
did
the
something
council.
brave. Kale blinked once.
Who hired
Then
them,
leaned slightly closer to him,
Elias?
as though that answer alone had lifted something heavy he had been carrying his whole life. Around the chamber, no
readings
one
are
moved. Because in
fluctuating.
that moment, every species present understood something that
You
had never
must
been written into any
stabilize it
treaty.
now.
Fear can
We
control
don't
a
have
galaxy
much
for
time.
centuries. But sometimes, all it takes to begin changing it is one person willing to answer
The
fear
station
with
is with
kindness.
you.
Not because it is easy, not because it is safe, but because someone has to be first.
United.
Weeks later, the footage from Meridian Station would still be
It's
discussed
for you,
across dozens
Elias.
of systems. Analysts would debate it. Politicians would resent it. Historians would study it. And ordinary people, the ones history usually forgets, would remember something far simpler. Not the bite, not the blood, not the
Elias,
scandal. They would
guardian
remember
of
the
the
human who knelt
spindle.
beside a frightened child the entire galaxy had already judged and chose to see more.
May you lead
And for the
with
first time in
wisdom
generations, the
and
galaxy
strength.
began looking at the Verith not as monsters, but as people. And perhaps the
Your
strangest part
reactor
of all
souvenir.
was that it happened because a human being did the one thing no one else had considered. He cared. The